Hello, this is Dr. Tall Paul Simon, psychiatrist. Wanted to talk to you a little bit about paranoia. If you ask yourself, am I being paranoid or oh my gosh, am I losing my mind about this? That's what this video is about. First of all, I am a psychiatrist. I am a specialist who practices medicine in the field of psychiatry. I've been practicing psychiatry in private practice for about 13 years now and see people dealing with a wide range of mental health issues. Seen people in the hospital, in the emergency rooms, and medical floors in hospitals and rehab centers and all kinds of different locations. So mostly I see people outpatient nowadays. So people often, or not often, but sometimes come to me asking me for help with paranoia. And how I approach that with them is to ask them questions about, well, what is paranoia to them? What are they experiencing? Just tell me more about that situation. Um, some people describe a lot of anxiety with that because certainly paranoia, what do you think of? You think of anxiety. How does that feel? How does it make you feel if you're having paranoid thoughts? Paranoia can come in a lot of different forms, but one common theme is that people are watching them or people are monitoring them. Maybe the government or somebody who has wronged them in the past, such as past employers or neighbors or different people who there's some kind of animus, there's some kind of, dysfunction in the relationship, okay? Um, so if somebody's had run-ins with a neighbor and there's friction there about some issue, or a past employer fired them, for instance, that can be some examples that I've come across where people develop some paranoia about that. Now, there's a difference between paranoia and psychosis, okay? So some people are paranoid, they're on guard or hypervigilant, and they may be um, due to past trauma or bad experiences in their life, do feel like people are conspiring against them. And the way that they interpret the difficulty in their life is to come up with some kind of conspiracy where people feel like just there must be some explanation for all the bad things is coming their way. So you try to make a theory about that, and that can be a little bit dangerous and uncomfortable, obviously, because if you start believing that there is a conspiracy or something, then anybody that comes along and opposes you in some way or makes you irritable, oh, they must be part of that conspiracy. They automatically get absorbed into that conspiracy and that paranoia. So that's the problem with that kind of paranoia, where people are out to get you in a way, and that can be quite consuming. The other form of paranoia that takes on a more obvious kind of a psychosis, perhaps, is when people maybe feel like they're being monitored or watched. And I've seen people think that their cameras, hidden cameras, that's a very common theme, or listening devices that are somehow monitoring their behavior or maybe even their thoughts or whatever. Now, if you're having some of that, that can be obviously very scary. Um, how I would approach that with someone is to really get the idea of who may be involved in those things or who you feel like is involved in those things. And just to kind of understand, what the person's dealing with. And then I never dispute those facts, okay? Because it's their experience, and there's no way technically for me to know if it's true or not. I mean, how can I know if there's a camera hidden in their apartment. I'm not going to go to their house and, look, they've already done all that, right? And maybe they haven't found it, but they still believe it. So it's not my job to convince them or convince you or whoever that that isn't happening. Okay. And people who are friends or loved ones of somebody with a paranoid belief like that, that are caught up in that belief, it's not your job to convince them otherwise either. In fact, it may be really counterproductive to really try to convince the person that they're not being watched. Okay. So what I do with people is try to validate their feelings. Okay. Because it is very scary to have that thought and believe that. But trying to directly argue against it just is not going to work. So I try to help people from their lived experience, if you will. So, and if, let's say, it is a paranoid delusion, okay, and let's say you take a medication to try to address that possibility and it gets better, okay, then the person's suffering is relieved, right? Now, they may not be convinced that the medication had anything to do with it, but they know they're feeling better. So the proof is in the pudding, so to say. If somebody has a delusion or is really paranoid, again, it's not usually helpful to argue directly against the specific content of that paranoia or that delusion. It's important to empathize with a person, but not get caught up in it. So it's more about being supportive. And for instance, if somebody says, Dr. Simon, there's all these videos and people are monitoring me and people are doing these things on purpose and there's some conspiracy. Again, I'll gather the information and say, okay, this, tell me more about, what do you think's going on? And then validate their feelings, say that really is difficult and that must be very difficult to deal with. So, and then I encourage them, okay, what are we going to do about this in a safe, healthy way? So most people I find who are struggling with paranoia and delusions are at least conceptually open to the possibility, theoretically, that it is not true, but it's so real to them that they can't accept that possibility. Okay. So what I try to do is walk that middle line where, okay, person, talking to this person, say, okay, there's possibility from my perspective that it's not true, but there's a possibility that it is true. There's no way for me to disprove it. So let's address both. Okay, let's go to counseling or therapy to try to deal with the stress of those persecutory thoughts and realities or whatever. But let's also work on the medication too, and try to address both possibilities as best as possible. Okay. Again, if it is a paranoid delusion, you're not going to be able to get rid of it directly by reasoning through it, because it doesn't work. That's the nature of a delusion or a paranoid delusion. So yeah, it's a difficult spot to be in, and a lot of times people just need some support and guidance. Another trick that can be helpful is if, let's say, you're struggling with what you think may be paranoid delusions, or somebody's maybe hearing voices, even hearing things that other people can't hear. Sometimes reality testing, what we call reality testing, can be useful. So that's where the person has somebody that they trust, maybe a friend or a family member or somebody close to them, and they can share what they're experiencing with or the other person. So for instance, somebody might tell their friend that, I'm hearing this voice right now. Do you hear it as well? And their friend would say, well, no, I don't hear that, And so with that trusted feedback, they might be able to, better accept the possibility that what they're experiencing may be, hallucination or delusion or something like that. It's always kind of amazing to me when somebody feels like they're being watched, and if you fall into the temptation of trying to dispute the facts, is that they will always come up with some counter argument, or there's always something to block the possibility in their mind that it is not actually going on. So, you can't argue with somebody who has a delusion and convince them otherwise. So it just leads to friction. So I hope this video has been helpful. Please, if somebody you know or yourself are struggling with paranoia or some of these things that I've been talking about, please talk to your doctor. Their job is to help you as best as possible. Talk to somebody that you trust and care, and who cares for you and you care about. If you're ever feeling out of control and suicidal, or just like you're going to lose it and do something bad, please call 911, call 988, the National Suicide Hotline, or go to the nearest emergency room. They deal with a lot of emergencies, every kind of emergency you can imagine, so they can help you as well. So you take care, okay?